up dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wide variety. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the alley, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, the secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Good morning, monsters, and welcome to this week's episode of Monsters on the Edge here on the Untold Radio Network. I am your host, Barnaby Jones from Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. Today's show is pre-recorded, so if we are ignoring your questions or comments throughout the show, that is why. We are not in studio. We are pre-recorded. Coming up, guys, this week I am going to be at the Cedarburg Public Library talking about UFOs, UAPs, and the government disclosure hearings. It is going to be Thursday, July 17th at 6 p.m. at the Cedarburg Public Library. It is a free event. Come on out and check it out. And then, guys, on the 19th, we are doing a UFO CE5 Close Encounters skywatching event with the Central Wisconsin CE5 group in southern Wisconsin and Adams. It is in conjunction with PBS Wisconsin. If you are interested in coming out for this event, head on over to Wisconsin Caps and click on the public events page for all the information and more, or go to Facebook and click on the Central Wisconsin CE5 Facebook group. And then, guys, July 26th, we will be at UFO Days in Elmwood, Wisconsin, SilCon in Gaze, Illinois in September. We are going to be at the Van Meter Visitor Festival coming up in September 27th. And the Neenah Public Library, we are doing a paranormal presentation as well as a paranormal investigation of the library. You don't want to miss that one. Then, guys, next year we are coming to Cape Girardeau, Missouri for CapCon Missouri, April 17th through the 19th, and Fond du Lac, Wisconsin for CapCon Wisconsin, May 8th through the 10th. That's what we got coming up, guys. It's going to be a great time. Without any further ado, as I said, today's show is pre-recorded, so let's get to my guest. My guest today is Darrell Denton. He is known as the Tennessee Bigfoot Man. He had his first terrifying encounter while deer hunting in November 1992, which changed his life forever. He had his second encounter in 1999 while fishing. That family of forest people became his friends. He has also had many encounters since with these creatures and the dogman as well. Darrell's main research is in the Land Between the Lakes area, now with his team, Martin Groves, Nanelli. There we go. And Ron Moorhead. He is the founder of the Facebook group Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures. He has been a guest on many podcasts, radio shows, documentaries, and speakers at conferences. He is also currently writing his first book. Please welcome to the show, Darrell Denton. All right. Welcome to the show, Darrell. Welcome. How are you doing?
Doing great. Again, I appreciate you having me on. I'm honored to be here.
Awesome. Absolutely. I'm excited to talk to you finally here after we've gotten all of our technical stuff straightened out. So
well, it could have been worse. We're fine now. That's the thing about technology. I'm not very good at it. I don't know how to fix most of it, but we're ready to go now.
Awesome. All right. So I guess we'll start with Bigfoot and work our way into what you're doing now. So your first encounter was kind of by accident. You were out hunting, right?
I was on my grandfather's farm, and I practically grew up on that farm. It was a really large farm, very rural, in Cannon County, Tennessee, which is about 92 miles from Nashville. It's way out in the middle of the country, and I mean the closest house to us was probably half a mile or so, and it was just a farmhouse. It was just a very rural area, and I'd hunted there all my life, but I'd never been in that far in the woods. I mean, I normally only hunted the first ridge or the first hollow, as we call them in Tennessee, not real far from, the fence line to climb over to get to my grandfather's house. But I was looking for a trophy deer that particular day. My grandfather pointed out off his back porch, "You see that third hill?" And I said, "I do." He said, "That's where I would go." He said, "There's nobody been in that area in no telling how many years." And I went into that area the day before and set my climbing tree stand up next to a creek. And it was a real steep hill. There's three of them I had to go down. It was like 45-degree angle. These hills and mountains in Tennessee, some of them are straight up. And it was pretty close to that. And it was almost an hour walk to get there from his backyard. And in the dark, and even though I had my stand there, it was in the dark, and it took a while to find it. But I was in my stand that day, and I'd been hunting those woods all my life, and I'd never seen anything that I didn't know what it was. And this creature steps out of a cane thicket, this tall cane that some people call it, looks kind of like bamboo, but it's cane, and it's green, and grows real tall, 14, 15, 16 foot tall, and it was real thick, and three deer had just come out of there probably 30 minutes before that. In that area somewhere, I couldn't tell from the angle I was in, but this cane thicket ran all the way down this creek bank to the left of me, and this creature stepped out of that and changed my life forever. I couldn't believe what I was looking at, and my mind didn't even register that I was really seeing this thing. So it was definitely the scariest I've ever been in my life. This creature jumped the creek bank and walked down the game trail on top of that creek bank and turned and looked right at me. He knew exactly where I was at. And I'm sure he probably had heard me coming in because I had heard something bipedal moving and walking in there. Kind of startled me because I didn't think there was another hunter in there. There shouldn't be. I had three of my friends with me, but we had such a large area to hunt. They were in probably a mile away from me. And this thing just stopped and looked at me, and it showed me its teeth several times, and it was very mad. It was the meanest, ugliest looking thing that I've ever seen, and growled at me a few times. Went over to a tree where I had a little drag rag hanging up from the day before, which has deer scent over it on it, and it kind of lures a large buck deer into the area, and jerked that whole tree limb out of the tree and threw it down, and walked back over to the same spot and was looking at me like I thought it was going to kill me. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever been through. And still today, I can't believe how frightened I was. I've never been scared like that before. I remember just trying to breathe. I was so just frozen that I could hardly breathe, and I couldn't make my mind up what to do with this thing. You know, I'm like 28 feet up in a tree. I'm kind of overlooking this thing because I'm on a 45-degree hill. I'm straight up, kind of overlooking it. I'm seeing this tree up high, and it's kind of overlooking that. And I had one 50 caliber black powder Hornady bullet in there, and it was the opening day of black powder season, and that was the time we always got our best deer every year. And I figured, well, if I shoot this thing and this one bullet doesn't kill it, it's going to come across that creek and pull me out of this tree, and that's pretty much what I had on my mind. It was definitely terrifying. So I didn't fire on it. I was afraid that it would just make it mad if I did shoot it, and it didn't kill it. It was going to come after me, and finally it turned and walked away, and I jumped out of the top of that tree, 28. I don't know exactly how high I was up, but it was somewhere around 27, 28 feet, and landed in the leaves and slid all the way down into the creek. And then I got up and ran as fast as I could over those hills, and they're like 100 yards from the bottom to the top of each hill in a 45-degree angle. I was so out of breath. By the time I got to the top of the first one, it was very difficult to catch my breath. And I was looking back, making sure the creature wasn't coming. I was looking, didn't see it. And by the time I got down the bottom of that hill and started up the second hill, about halfway, I had to stop. I was so out of breath, and I looked up on the hill I just came down, and there it stood. It was watching me. And all that did was just give me the most energy I could ever need. I was going again, and I ran as hard as I could to the top of that hill, looking back to make sure this thing wasn't chasing me. And, you know, now, after all those years, I thought back many a time, it was probably a different one, and it was just watching me run. But, because the other one went off in a different direction. And by the time I got to the third hill, the bottom of it, there was about a 7-foot barbed wire fence at the top. And my grandfather had his cows in that field on the other side of it that bordered the pasture, bordered his fence going to his back of his house. And I jumped that fence and running down that hill, and cut a huge gash in my leg. I tore my pants from the bottom all the way up past my knee. Just kept going. I was so in fear that I probably could have run through the fence. I mean, I didn't realize I was that distraught, but I was. And the time I got across the field looking back continuously, got to my granddad's house and the back door, and ran in and sat down in the corner of the living room, and he was sitting in there in his rocking chair. It's an old farmhouse, wood farmhouse, and there was a big, huge pot-bellied stove in the middle of the floor, and I sat down behind it in the corner, and he kept saying, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" My granddad never called me by my name, and he was 92 years old at that time, but he was physically fit like nobody I'd ever seen at that age, and he was still raising crops and tobacco and corn and gardens. And "What's wrong with you, boy? You look like you've seen a ghost." And I said, I finally got my breath enough to tell him I didn't see a ghost, but I seen a monster in the woods. And he kind of chuckled a little bit. He goes, "A monster? There's not any monsters in the woods." And I said, "Oh yeah, this was a monster. I've never seen anything like this thing. It was the meanest, ugliest looking thing I ever seen, and it was really mad. It wanted to get me, and what did it look like?" And I told him, and surprisingly, he never told me anything about these creatures. And he goes, "Oh, you seen a wood booger?" I said, "A wood booger? What is a wood booger?" He said, "I should have thought nobody's been back in there in many years, and that's probably where they stay." And he said, "They're pretty territorial. They don't like people in their area, and you're probably in its area and made it mad." And he said, "I've seen 4 in my lifetime. Heard more than that and seen parts of more than that, but seen four just staring at me over a fence while I'm working in the field. And he said, they don't bother you, they just territorial. And in the wintertime, they come to my hen house and they take 3 or 4 chickens and what they need to eat when they're hungry, and they'll leave a little pile of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it. And I said, well, how come you never told me about these things? Because I surely wouldn't have went back in those woods. He goes, that's exactly why I didn't tell you, because if I'd have told you about them, you'd have never hunted like you did all your life and camped in the woods with your dog by yourself and the barn loft and all the things you did. And he goes, that's why I didn't tell you. So that was pretty much my first experience, and it was definitely life-changing. I didn't go into woods it was at least 7 years. I didn't hunt anymore. My friends went back up there. We've been going up there 5 years prior to that happening, and there was 3 friends of mine, Jason, Cody, and Scott. And we went back the next year, but I didn't hunt. I told them I'm not hunting anymore. I'm just going to hang out with my granddad. And I hung out with my granddad there at the house, and they went on their way hunting, and they never seen anything up there. I'd asked them one time, they thought I'd been drinking, and I told them, I said, no, I didn't mention anything else about it. And of course, in that day and time, you're talking about, 33 years ago, you didn't talk about Bigfoot and dogman or any of these creatures that are really out there, because people thought you were ready for the insane asylum. They really did. And especially with, me being an elected official at that time, I just got elected as a commissioner for my county, and I didn't want people to know that I'd seen this creature, because they wouldn't believe me. And it was rough, and I did a lot of research on my own in libraries. There wasn't a Facebook, there wasn't a YouTube, there wasn't any of that. You just had to kind of dig through things to see what you could find. And I did find some pictures of what they said was 10 Bigfoot, different types, in a library. And the second one, surprisingly, was a wood booger. And it looked just like what I'd seen, except for the eyes. The eyes that I seen were black. The eyes in this one were red. And I was, no doubt, I had figured out that my granddad was right on target on what he said about them, and he knew them, and his family, his parents had knew of them. But that was my first experience that got me into this field, and I didn't ever want to see one again.
I don't blame you. Yeah. Wow. So, okay, I would like to dig a little bit more into this. I know you've talked on other shows and stuff about your second encounter with the fishing as well, and there's 2 things that stand out in both of these encounters. Is that they're by water. The creek and then the fishing are both by. Was it the fishing one? Is that by a lake, or was that a creek or river as well? I don't remember.
The fishing was on the Cumberland River of Tennessee, Cumberland River, which turns into Lake Barkley, which goes into the land between the lakes.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So, we've heard about this before, that these things obviously need water and stuff, and the sound of the rushing water, the smells that it brings and everything tend to possibly mask the people being there. I mean, look even at Bluff Creek, the whole thing there is right by this running water that may have added to the incidents of why they were seen or why Patty was seen in the first place and stuff. So do you think that played a role in your encounters, the initial times at least?
Well, I mean, I've learned a lot over the years. I spent a real hard, probably 25 years of actually researching these creatures. And, I'm no expert, first of all. If anybody thinks I'm claiming to be one, they're wrong, because I can only tell you what I've experienced and what I've learned. And it may be different from what you've experienced or learned, but there are different types of these creatures. I believe I've seen what to be 3 to 4 different types. The first one being the wood booger, which I call a type 2, only because of the book said a type 2. And it was exactly pretty much what it said. The other types I've seen, I believe, would be more like the Patterson Gimlin type. That's the ones I run into on the river. And then another one that I've seen were very similar to that one. The only difference, the body size was completely different in the way it was built. The rivers are definitely something they're going to stay close to. I've learned that. I consider myself a pretty good Bigfoot experiencer. You don't ever find Bigfoot people. I've come up with this saying years ago because it's nothing but the truth. You don't find Bigfoot, it finds you. And there is a difference between these creatures. The ones on the river, I relate to them I call them the forest people. And the reason why I call them the forest people is because they make the large X's with trees in the woods, huge X's. It can be almost a young tree, and they'll break it at the bottom. I'm talking about a 6-8 inch tree. They'll snap it, and they'll form an X in the woods. That's their marker of their family. That's what they go by. And they also make those X's and lay them on the trail. But getting back to your question, they do love water. They're going to stay around water. And the reason I think they stay around water, because every creature that they feed upon has to have water. And the deer and the hogs are mainly their number one and number two foods in my area. They're going to feed on the wild boar. They're going to feed on the deer. Mainly the white-tailed deer is their number one food. So you're always going to find animals and find these creatures. I've learned a lot by being in the woods by myself for 7-8 days and nights at a time, and I wouldn't do that anymore, but I used to do it, and it's dangerous. There's too many other creatures out there that I know about now. And it's not just a good Bigfoot. It can be a bad Bigfoot. There are those too. And Scott Carpenter and I, the late great Scott Carpenter, have had that conversation many a times. He thinks they have you on the menu, all of them do, until they size you up, and then they realize that they want to be your friend or tolerate you, basically, because they do feel like they're completely over us. I mean, we're a lower being than they are, and that may be true. You know, my relationship with the Native American people, with my grandmother being Native American, they relate them as the Chayitanka. They don't call them Bigfoot or Sasquatch. They think it's disrespectful. They call them the Chayitanka, which means large one, great elder, keeper of the forest. That's what that means. So, and these creatures are the keeper of the forest. They're very funny about people coming in and leaving trash. They don't like. They can read your intentions. I'll say that. It's amazing the abilities they have. It's hard for the human mind to wrap around that. It is for me, but it's true. They have abilities like nothing I've ever seen.
So going back to the question though, that's do you think that the reason why you saw it the first time was because the river kind of masked your presence a little, or do you think?
No, I think the biggest reason I seen it the first time, because I was these 3 deer that came out over toward that cane thicket somewhere in there. That was probably this creature's hunting area that he hunted, and he was probably after the same deer I was after. So, and there again, it relates by being next to a stream, because, you know, the deer have to have water, and all the other creatures do too. Anytime you find streams out in a remote area like that, you're going to find lots of game trails. And they're going to be right next, most of the time, to the edge, the top edge next to the creek bank. And where you find them crisscross in many areas, with the deeper end, there'll be sometimes 10 or 12 game trails that were crisscross on the same spot. And right there is where you'll find a blind. I've never not found a blind in that particular spot I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a pile of trees and brush right in that spot, and it's an ambush area for the Bigfoot to get behind for a deer or whatever other creature is crossing through there that wants to feed upon.
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit about what they actually look like, because you talked about the first one being very monstrous looking, and that. Have you ever seen the statue of the Big Muddy Monster?
I have seen it. Didn't look a lot like that. You know, this creature looked like, the best way I can describe it, its face looked like black leather, wrinkled black leather. It had wrinkles in the leather which is not leather, but it looked like it under its eyes. And this creature may have had some type of deformity or been injured in some way, because one side of his mouth was kind of miscontortioned. It was kind of twisted up in a way, which probably made it look even meaner than it was. And its eyes, the way it squinted them, his forehead was just like a normal human, except it was, of course, dark. The creature was solid black hair. The hair covered its entire head, up to about right under the bottom of the nose, all the way up was black leather. And then it was hair starting again. And it was like that all over its face and its body. The only places I didn't see any hair was on the top of its fingernails, the top of its knuckles, when it had its hands hanging down. It looked like they were kind of wore off. And I don't know if that's because, well, I do know now that they do run on all fours at the same time. They don't just walk. Mm-hmm. But that may be why that one had that. I didn't know they did that at that time. But it was just, it was nothing like any of the other ones I've ever seen. I've never seen another one like that, and I hope I don't.
So all the ones that you've seen, have they all been black down in that area?
Not quite as black. Some of them are more of a gray, a dark black. A lighter black, not more of a gray. But all the ones I've seen have been dark colored. I've not seen a brown one or any other color but a black and one with a little gray on it. But the ones I met on the river, they were more like the Patterson Gimlin type. They had their hair was a little more wavy and curly on the side. And this was related to the very first one I seen on the river was a female. And she became my closest friend in that clan. And we just hit it off. I don't even know how to explain it. It scared me to death when it first happened to me. I didn't know where I wanted to go back or not, because something was still in my manna buckets, and I thought it was a person in there. But I was in a real remote area that I'd fished probably 4 or 5 times with a couple buddies of mine I went to school with, and their uncle worked at this water or sewer or whatever kind of plant it is there. It's on the river. It's a huge plant, and you could park down behind it inside a gate. You had to have clearance to go in there. They wouldn't just let you drive in there if you didn't know somebody. And you get out and walk back in there. It's probably 200 yards from that location. And those creatures were just completely different than the first one. Even when I first had the encounter with the first one, she was just leaning over, looking at me, and go back in, trying to hide when I looked at her. And when I realized I'd run into another one of these creatures, it was really kind of upsetting. I said, oh my God, I don't want to be around these things again. Because I didn't even go in the woods for like 7 years. Because I didn't want to be around them. And I didn't want to see one again. I literally had nightmares and everything for the first couple of years after that. And woke up in the middle of the night thinking this thing was coming after you up a tree. Everything bad you can put in your mind would happen to you in those nightmares or dreams. It was kind of crazy. And the ones on the river were just different. They even looked friendly. I don't even know how to explain that, but they did. They walked differently. They were built differently. The one that I first seen was tall. It had huge arms, a huge chest, upper torso, thighs, but its legs were thin, and from below its knees, its legs were probably about the size of mine. But from the legs, the bottom part, all the way down to the feet. But the ones on the river are more bulky than that. They look completely different than that creature. They were just built differently, and the hair was different on them. They did not look as human as that one did.
Interesting. Yeah, when you see these, like the typical statues and stuff that people have in their front yards and stuff, they always look like the very cone head and the very animalistic and stuff. And I recently got to go down to Murfreesboro, Illinois, to the Big Muddy Monster, and I looked at the statue, and it's very human looking. And it disturbed me on a way that I'm like, you hear all the stories of people that they got him in their sights in their gun and they couldn't shoot it because it looked like a human. And when you look at all these other statues and stuff, you're like, how do you picture that? And when you see this one, the Murfreesboro one, it does look very human. And we had this research area up in Upper Michigan, and there was a trail camera picture that has what we believe the face of one of these creatures in it. And it looks almost exactly like that statue. And then recently as well, there was another picture that supposedly came out of Canada. And I don't know the whole history of the picture, where it came from. The guy that posted it didn't really say much, but the picture that he posted was almost exactly like the picture that we had from Upper Michigan. So I believe that it was a real picture as well, but they look very human.
Though I don't know, a lot of people don't like the guy and accuse the guy of being a hoax. I don't know if he's a hoax. I know that I truly believe that Les Stroud wouldn't hang out with the gentleman I'm talking about with, or go out with him, Todd Standing. I personally think a lot of the stuff he posted was as legitimate as it could get. So I don't think it's fake or hoaxed at all. But my point of bringing that up, I don't know if you've seen the one that he was famous for, like a person with hair on it, like it was almost like it was glued on or something. That looked more like the ones on the river than anything I've seen. That looked really close. Except the head wasn't quite as round and big. It was more narrow. But the same type features, the hair was like that on the ones on the river. The only difference, it had a little more wave and curl in it when it was longer. And there was one in there that had longer hair, but and he was the bigger one that watched them. He was somewhere around 7 foot tall. He wasn't fully grown, but he was very friendly. He watched over the two that I became friends with. Mainly the female, but the one behind her was a male about the same size as her. But I think that probably people don't understand what these creatures are capable of. I know I'm kind of getting off subject, but I just don't understand what they're capable of. And you have to spend a lot of time with these creatures to understand what I'm saying, because, the average person that's sitting at home and doesn't take his kids into the woods, or he doesn't hunt or anything, they have no idea that this is real. These creatures are out in the woods, probably maybe behind your house. And they don't even think about it. They just think it's some kind of joke or a myth. You got Harry and the Hendersons or the beef jerky Bigfoot, and it's just a joke. And when you see one of these things, it's not a joke, and it changes your life forever.
Absolutely. So the ones that you saw, either ones, did they have the conical head, or were they
No, the ones on the river did not have the conical head. The one I said the body was contortion different, and that's what I consider probably a type 4. It was in the dark when I seen these creatures, but I could see them pretty well. The form of them. I was in the woods by myself in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, and basically lost up there for 3 days. I can't believe I got lost, but I did. And I was on a hiking trail out of the Shenandoah National Park. I parked there because a lady kept calling me and messaging me, and go up there. There's a whole family of them living up there. I've seen them, and I'm scared of them. Go up there and look at them. And I said, well, I've seen them before. I don't have to go up there. And I went over there to see them, and she was supposed to meet me there with her husband, and she didn't show up. I didn't see her, or I was at the wrong location, and I went up there by myself, about a 4 or 5 mile hike in there, and got back there in the dark. And those were more cone-headed, like you're talking about, with not hardly having a neck. Mm-hmm. And their bodies were bigger. I mean, when I say bigger, their arms were just bigger, and their legs, they were more bulky than any of the ones I'd seen before. And that's why I think that I've seen 3 or 4 different types of them, because the other ones they all had bulk, but not like these did. And these were just huge. Their legs were just so big, and their shoulders, their width, maybe 4 foot wide. The big elder, I guess that's what he was. But there was 4 or 5 of them around me in my little camp. And they weren't trying to harm me, but they could have. They were staring at me, and it made me nervous. And I'm up there in the middle of nowhere without a weapon, and I don't know what they're going to do because all these things, like I said, aren't friendly. So um, I suggest people be very cautious if they want to research these creatures. Like I said, they're going to find you before you find them, because I definitely believe they know when you get out of your vehicle and go in the woods. They've always got a peeker watching you, and these younger juveniles like to hide behind a tree or belly crawl and watch you and let the other ones know. And the other animals let you know. The crows are really good at letting the Bigfoot know what's in there. They'll fire up, and the Bigfoot knows something's there that's not normal. And even the squirrels, I've noticed different around the Bigfoot when I'm around them when they're around. So I think they all kind of work together. I know it probably sounds crazy, but that's my belief. And I was in there so much for nearly 5 years with those on the river that it was just amazing how they could read my thoughts, and they knew my intentions. And if you have bad intentions, you're not going to see one.
Interesting. So I know you've talked about some of the encounters and stuff that you had with the river ones. Now, before I get into that, you mentioned that the difference between, like, you call the one like the wood booger and you call the other ones the forest people. What is your distinction between the two? Like, is it just the way they looked or acted, or why do you consider them different?
Well, I would have to. I'm in the process of writing a book, and it's a really long, lengthy discussion for me to explain that part to you. But I'll try to explain it as, first of all, these creatures are not aggressive. They're not there to harm you. They just want to be understood, be respected, and they have to gain trust in you. You gain trust in them before they're going to relay to you on their feelings toward you and other things. And I tried to communicate with those creatures for a long, long time, and it was very difficult. They do have their own language. They do know they know what you mean. They have a way of understanding your sympathy or your empathy toward them, and you can't necessarily communicate with them because they do understand English and they can speak English words. At least these could, and they have their own language and they understand other languages. Because I'd recite a few words in Sioux language, and they seemed to understand what I was saying, and I've used English. I'll give you an example. Every time I left, when I come in every time, I would say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm coming in to see you." And, I'm like, it's like nearly 200 yards from the gate I go through to back to where they were at, in this huge kudzu patch. Real thick, ivy-looking, big leaves stuff that they lived in. And it was real thick in there. And I would start yelling, walking down the little game trail I was coming in, "Hey, I'm here to see you," so they know it was me and not somebody else, and in case they weren't watching me. And they would start getting excited. I'd hear a whoop, and I'd hear a little, them kind of mumbling and grumbling, and they were excited to see me. And, then after I brought them whistles, I brought them some whistles as a gift one time. They learned how to blow them. And as soon as I come in and started talking to them, I'd hear whistles to the left, to the right, to the back, across the river. I gave them, I don't know, there might have been 9 or 10 whistles in that little pack. And they're intelligent enough to use them. And when I left, I'd say, "Bye, see you guys later. I'll be back." I was always there the next day or the day. I never went more than 2 days without visiting them. And I'd say, "Bye, see you later," and I'd hear them, "Bye, bye, bye." I mean, different tone, but in different. There was a whole family in that kudzu, and I only witnessed 3 full-bodied creatures, but I can see parts of the other ones. I never seen the large leader that would call the elder, but I could see parts of him, and I could see parts of other ones in there, but. For some reason, this younger female at the time when I met her, she was probably 5 or 5.5 foot tall. And by the time I had continued to meet them, she was probably a little over 6 foot tall. But she grew some, and they eat a lot of the same things we do, and they love bread products. They love their favorite food is cantaloupe, and their favorite meat is probably the same thing a lot of us like, cooked bacon. They love that. I tried every food you could think of before I never even heard of gifting at this time. I went in there one day and I had a sandwich, and I thought, well, I'm sitting here eating, I'm visiting them, and I don't have anything for them. So the next day I started bringing stuff. That's how it got started. And, a lot of times I was trying to work and I just run down there and stay a couple hours, from my job and get back. And they're just amazing creatures. And these were, like I said, they were friendly, they were non-aggressive. They just wanted to be left alone. And if you're lucky enough to be chosen to be a part of them, I camped out in there. I slept in a sleeping bag 15 foot from the whole clan in that kazoo. I could see them looking over the kazoo at night looking at me. And they didn't try to bother me or harm me, and had a little bitty fire going. And, they were good as far as that went. I carried a shotgun for the first 2 or 3 weeks when I first started going in there and propped it against the tree. And they didn't seem to really like it, but they for some reason had a feeling about me that I wasn't going to harm them if they didn't harm me. So that's all I can come up with for that. So they are completely different than any ones I've ever run into. And, after years of not even knowing anything about it, I don't know if anybody knows Dr. Matthew Johnson, but some people think he's off his rocker. I don't personally think he is. I don't necessarily know that I believe everything that he does, but I didn't experience it, so I can't say it's real or not real. But I will say the same creatures that I feel like I had is the same creatures he had, because his made the X's, mine made the X's, and they were the same type apparently, because he's still friends with his, and I'd love to still be friends with mine, but unfortunately I can't. But he called it a Xanu, Xanue, which that's what the large X represents. That's their symbol. The X is of their type. And I do believe that I think some of the Bigfoot out there will never befriend any human, and they will probably hurt you if they can. And then I think there's some that's tolerable. They're just like people. There's good and bad in all of us, and the same with them. But this particular type is the real, what I call the real Bigfoot.
Interesting. Now, for those that don't know, what ended up happening was the area got bulldozed, correct? And just everything got lost in there.
I'd never been away from them no more. I was either there every day or every other day, and I would always spend at least a couple hours. Sometimes I'd stay the whole day, depending on how busy I was. But I enjoyed being with them. I was learning a lot from them, and a lot of things that I didn't quite understand that I learned to understand. But yeah, they come in. I got them tied up at work. I just couldn't get there. And it was about a week and a half or a little longer before I was worried about it the whole time. I just got to get down there real quick. At least I'm okay. Everything's okay. And it went on for a week and a half, 2 weeks before I got back down there. When I walked in, I was just absolutely shocked. I could see bulldozer tracks or some type of tracks. All the kazoo was gone. It was in a big, huge pile, that and a lot of the trees. And they had little stakes all the way around, like a square, like they were squared something in with little pink ribbons on the stakes. And I was yelling for my friends, and I'd walk a mile or 2 miles behind that, where it was still overgrown back in there, thinking maybe they retreated back in there. But I never heard it. I never heard from them or seen them again. And I went in there numerous times for up to over a year after that. I even went across the river on the other side thinking, well, maybe they went across the river, they run out of here. And I never heard from them or seen them again. And I don't know if they were killed. Somebody went in there and they were trying to build on something to this plant that they were going to build on, or whatever they were building. And one of those people that were, bulldozing the area, a contractor or whatever, might have seen a couple of them and scared them, and they call the authorities, and who knows what happened to them. I hope that they weren't exterminated or killed because they were just good. They were not that type of creature to harm if somebody didn't harm them. But I do believe that something bad happened to them because I think they would have found me by now, or I would have found them. So they do have that ability, I think, to locate people that they know.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate. We had an area, one of my researchers on my team was working as well, and they came in and deforested it all and cut it down for logging. And
oh yeah, they don't like that.
Yeah,
they don't even like you doing anything to their area, especially trashing it. So if they have an area, they consider that their area and it's their territory, and they. Best thing for you to do if you're living on a farm or a piece of property with these creatures, they were probably there before you were. And, they're not trying, most of them aren't, if they're living there, they've been there normally quite a while. Unless they've been run out of a different area. And I know that happens sometimes, but most of the people that I've went out and researched that call me or send me a message, I used to do this all the time. I had 2 or 3 teams and we'd go out to people's places that were frightened of them or afraid they didn't know what kind of creature they had, and most of the time it turned out to be a Bigfoot type family, and some of them were friendly and some of them weren't. Some of them just like to look through people's windows at night because they're curious and they like to watch people, and that was more of my calls than anything, that they had one of them on their deck eating their apples, or they had one looking through the window, or I had one in the ladies' swimming pool one time. But it's they weren't there trying to harm you. They're just trying to kind of fit in, and I'm not saying that some of them couldn't have been, but most of them were just trying to fit in with you. But when you start cutting their trees and going into their area, it's kind of like me going, when we go into their forest or their woods, that's their house. That's like them coming to our front door and sitting on our couch. I mean, you don't go into their house and just start cutting trees down. They don't see it quite like that way. They don't understand that nobody owns the land the way they look at it. It belongs to all the creatures, and that's the way they feel about it. I would suggest if you live on a farm with them or some area that has property, just try to get along with them and respect them, and they'll respect you.
Very good. I want to transition here because lately you've been working the land between the lakes, and instead of the Bigfoot, you've kind of transitioned over into the dogman field. So how did that get started?
Well, I probably would have never, I was very fortunate to have all the experiences I had with Bigfoot, first of all, because I wasn't looking to ever see another one again when I was on the river fishing. I didn't want to ever see another one again. And if I could have found another family like that on the river that meant so much to me, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't research and do that again. I just don't. I think it's very hard to find that type of situation. I was very lucky to run into that, and I just hit it off good with them. They hit it off good with me. They trusted me. When one touches your finger, I mean, she touched my shoe first, and I can actually say I touched the finger of a forest person, and I did. And that's the biggest contact I ever had, the only real touching contact I ever had. But, they kind of stayed back from me, and I stayed back from them, respecting them, and they respected me. But getting into the dogman thing, I think that was probably the changing of the guard, as you would say it for me, because after I lost them, I was never really into researching again Bigfoot. I didn't mind being around them or going out in the area and look and see what somebody had, or like the folks that asked me to come to the Shenandoah National Park and meet me, and I don't know what happened to them. I called them a couple of days later after I got my family way back and told them what had happened to me, and they were sorry some kind of something happened. But this I got into the dogman thing mainly because of Martin Groves, and Martin Groves and I have been going into LBL for 35, 40 years before we even knew anything about it. It's only an hour from our home, and it's we didn't know anything about dogman or Bigfoot. We just went up there to hunt and fish, and that was and camp out. There's a lot of campgrounds there, but you know, that's how I got to going up there. But you know, Martin. The funny thing about it, I had my encounter on November 6th of '92. Martin had his encounter approximately 5 or 6 months later, right after I did, but his was a little different. He was ran between the lakes turkey hunting, and these 3 dogman creatures, 2 of them tried to attack him and kill him, and he fired upon them, him and his partner did, and then 2 Bigfoot were in front of his truck as they were trying to get out. So he felt like they were along with the dogman creatures, and I don't personally believe that was Bigfoot. You know, Martin and I have talked about this many times. You know, Martin has been my best friend for 45 years, and he was a chief deputy sheriff in the county that I was mayor in at that time. And we just go to lunch together, and we were talking about Bigfoot and Dogman. I had nobody else to talk to. Thank God he was there. And it kind of slipped up one day. I said, man, can I tell you something you keep to yourself? And I told him about my encounter. He just about started to cry. He said, I've had PTSD for nearly a year because what I went through. So, but anyway, we got started in the LBL after Martin had his incident, which was back in '93. He started going into the LBL for the biggest reason to let people know that these creatures were in there. He was interviewing people. He spent a lot of man hours in there interviewing rangers, people that had seen these creatures, people that had been attacked, people that had almost been attacked, missing people. I think he's come up with 23 missing people from that area. A total number. You know, he's done a lot of work on that, and since he's retired, he was really on it, and he's done a great job interviewing these people. And his latest book is basically about those people that he interviewed. You know, his first book was Beasts Between the Rivers 1, and the second one, Beasts Between the Rivers 2, is the second book, and I'm also in that book. About half of it's about me and him and the big dog man that we've seen in the LBL, which was the strangest creature I've ever witnessed in my life. And that was in October of 22. Within half a mile, a little less than that, of the same area that Martin was attacked back in '93. That's where we were headed. And we're out there, it was close to 12 o'clock at night. We'd been in there for 3 days. That was our 3rd night, and we'd been out looking in different areas for the dogman creatures. And that area there is the area that goes back to where he was attacked. It's a gravel road that stops, and then you have to walk probably 400 or 500 yards to get to the actual spot that he was camped at. But we were on that area when we spotted that dogman, and it was the strangest thing I've ever seen. And you know, it went from a blue like mist. It was landing in a ravine, a ditch on the side of the gravel road we were on, and it looked right at me, and I looked at it and thought, what in the world is that? And it turned into a complete creature it was solid gray, silver colored. Each tip of its hair was almost like lit up. It's hard to explain, but it had eyes like little flashlights. They were deep and clear, and it was looking right at me. It had mane like a lion, and it looked at me like it was just evil looking, almost like a smile on its face. And I was 5 to 7 feet from this creature, and I was sitting in the passenger side of Martin's truck, and he was driving, and we were right there in his truck and on this old gravel road, and maybe doing 1 mile, 2 miles, just enough to make the truck roll when we spotted it. And I looked over at Martin, and he looked over, and he said, I've already seen it too. He could see it out my window, and this thing was landing in a ditch like a ravine next to a culvert, and just looked like it was a cat going to pounce. His feet were down in the grass, and I couldn't see them, but I could see the rest of it. It was like in a position like it was going to leap through the truck and get me. And this thing's head was about half the size of the windshield. It was just huge. And then all of a sudden, it did something, and Martin got real sick. The whole truck smelled so bad you couldn't hardly stand it. He got real sick. He was slumped over his steering wheel. I was sitting on that side. Then it hit me, but my legs were more tingly, and my chest felt like somebody was standing on it, and I had a headache. But he was gagging and telling me, I can't breathe, Bubba, I can't breathe. He had an allergic reaction to something, and his throat was swelling together, and his tongue was swelling up, and he said, I can't breathe. And I said, well, let me get you out of the truck. And I still got this creature down here next to us, and it gets up out of the ditch, and it walks down the side of the truck, around the back of the truck, and then in a field over on Martin's side. It's walking, and you can see it because we got all these lights on. And the weird thing about this creature was, it was a full-bodied creature, and it looked back at us as it was walking toward the woods, a big hill there, and it went into the woods. You could hear tree limbs breaking and everything when it went in there, like it was stepping on dead wood or branches, and you could see through this thing. It was transparent, but it was a full-bodied creature, silver in color. I don't even know how to explain it. I've never seen anything like that. But I was so concerned about Martin, I thought he was going to pass out. I said, well, let me drive, and I started to get out of the truck. He says, I don't go anywhere. This thing may come back. And he was trying to talk, and we finally made it down that road and turned around and made it to about a mile or two down the road to a check-in station with some street lights and areas to sit down for a minute. And I finally got him back to where he could breathe better, and he drank some water. But he was sick for a week over that, and really sick. And mine went away a lot quicker than his, but I didn't have the symptoms he had. And I've been zapped 3 times before, twice by Bigfoot, and once that's my first time by a dogman. But that was the same one that Small Town Monsters did the documentary on Martin and I on that creature, and went back to the location and everything. But I've seen 2 more since then. The first one I seen was in Tazewell County, Virginia in 2021, and that was by pure accident. Out in the middle of nowhere, this creature was stealing this older lady's goats. And I sat out there for probably almost 3 weeks before I finally seen the creature. It was just a huge creature, looked like a massive German Shepherd, black. Looked identical to a black German Shepherd, except the head was huge. And it walked on 2 feet. When it took off running from the corner of the field down to the corner I was in, I was overlooking on a rise sitting in my truck. And it didn't run like a dog. It kind of galloped like a horse. And it was just running through the field. I could see it right through the sage grass. And when it stopped across the fence at the bottom where I was on the hill, and it was at the bottom where I was overlooking, it stood up on 2 legs and crossed the fence and went into the wood line. And that was the first one I ever seen. It looked like a flesh and blood type creature. Now, this thing that we seen in the LBL that they did a documentary on, I have no idea what that thing was. I'd never seen anything like that. It was almost like it was a real creature, but at the same time, some type of paranormal type thing. I don't even know how to explain it. But
what did that one look like? As far as, like you said, the other one looked like a German Shepherd. What did the one that you and Martin see look like?
Well, that's what I was saying. It had a head, a big old head. The head was about half the size of the windshield. It had real deep, round, clear eyes, real deep. And they just looked at you. And it had a mane like a lion around its neck. And it was like a dog's head. But it had, at the very tips of all the hair was thick. It was straight. It was kind of long like regular dog hair, but on each tip it was almost like lit up. Just the very tip, a little tiny tip of the hair. And it walked almost like a lion or something, the way it walked. But it was dog-headed, and when it looked back at us, it was, like I said, it was so strange how you could see through it. You could see through the back part of it as it was walking, and I was just couldn't figure out what in the world I was seeing. But I don't know what it was. It was some type of dogman type creature. I can't give you any idea. I've never seen anything like that before.
When you said it walked, the one in the LBL there, was that on 2 legs or 4 legs?
No, it was on 4 legs.
Okay.
Yep. I never seen it on 2 legs one time. It was on 4 legs the entire time.
Same with the other one in Virginia then, until it
one in Virginia was running on all 4s until it got to the fence line. Then it stopped and stood up on 2 legs and put one leg over the fence, then the other leg, and walked off on 2 legs into the woods.
Did you happen to notice, did either of these have a tail?
I did not see a tail on either one of them. No, I did not. No, I did not. Now, the one in Virginia I was facing the front of it, and it kind of stepped over on the side part, so I probably couldn't have seen the tail on it anyway. And when it was running through the field, it would go through spots of sage grass. It's kind of tall, and I did not catch just a piece of it. And then when it broke out into the open, where there wasn't any sage grass, I said, "Wow, what is that?" Because it was just I never seen anything run like that. It almost ran like a horse, but it wasn't as big as a horse. This creature was only probably about 6 foot, 6.5 foot tall, but it was real bulky. And when it stood up on its legs, they made a popping noise. I don't even know how to explain it, but it was very strange. But it looked like a massive German Shepherd, a black one.
So you've done quite a bit of research in the LBL. What have you discovered about these things? We have so much information, like potentially about the Bigfoot creatures, the footprints, the potential hair, and all that stuff. What do we got on the dogman creatures? What have you guys found?
I've got all kinds of stuff on the dogman. I don't know how many pictures we've got of the tracks we took, and the thing about the dogman, there's 2 different kind of tracks that these creatures that we found. And I don't know why one's so much different than the other, but they are different. One of them looks more like a gigantic wolf track, not just a huge track, but not the size of any normal dog or wolf, just a massive track. And then the other one is more elongated with almost like a hawk in the back, and it has like the toes in the front with claws. So, and both of those tracks, we feel like are dogman tracks because there's just not anything big enough to make that kind of track. And, when the dogman that we seen in the LBL in 2000, we were going there once a month, and normally, and we would stay 3 or 4 nights, and we have 4 or 5 different areas that we research there, and they can be really hot or really cold, and then we go to another one and stay. And we stay in one cabin there. We call it Area 23, and we will stay out in the woods at night until we feel like the activity's done, because most of your activity is in the night with dogman creatures. They have been for us anyway. 2022, we had what we think was a great number of them surrounded us in the Land Between the Lakes, in an area that we go to pretty regular when we're there. And we were told by a gentleman that does a lot of research there on what creatures are there and where they are, and he's been in that park a long time, a gentleman by the name of Mark Maychek, and he knows us and knew of us, and he's close friends with Barton, and he told us to he always lets us know the areas that are hot. He'll go in there, or he'll hear about something that's going on, or a sighting, or he'll know somebody that had one of these creatures try to interrupt them or bother them. And we stayed in another area 23 that we call it. That seems to be a popular number in there. But we stayed in that area, and nobody had ever stayed there all night before. He said, nobody's ever stayed here all night. I suggest y'all leave out a little after dark. And of course, we're not leaving, we're staying. So, we had them surrounding us that night. That was March of 2022 when that happened. Ron was not with us. It was Barton Nunley, Martin Groves, and myself, and we had went up there because of that area. We heard it was a lot of creatures had been seen in there, and Mark seems to always be pretty knowledgeable about the areas to go. And anytime he hears of a hot spot, and a lot of times we have our own spot that we feel good about, but we happened to go in there that night, and we cooked dinner right there, and we were there all day and had firewood and just got set up for a camp there all night long. And you can back up in there, and Martin has a big Suburban. He backed it up in there in the woods there. And we set camp up there, and we had a tent and got set up with a campfire and had a table set up, and we had just got through cooking dinner. Mark ate dinner with us that night, and Martin loves to cook. And got dark. Mark left. He said, "It's time for me to go. I'm not going to be in here in the dark." He said, "I suggest y'all leave." And I said, "Well, we're gonna hang around and see what happens." And he says, "Well, I'm telling you, the last people that were here left because these things almost turned their camper over." And I said, "Okay." And we hung around about 11 o'clock. Well, first of all, it wasn't long after we ate that Martin got sick. He was sitting there cleaning up everything. We all were. Martin was mainly keeping the fire going, and it was a little chilly. And Martin got sick. We realized he got zapped by something. And up to the left of us on the hill was a Bigfoot, and it was watching us behind a cedar tree. It watched us a long time that night. I don't know, quite a while. And Martin has a real hard time seeing Bigfoot because he rebuked him years ago. And when he grew up, his family were terrorized by a family of Bigfoot that tried to kill him and all of his brothers and sisters. And he has a hard time seeing them because when you rebuke one of these creatures, you don't seem like you can see them or be around them. And I would put my camera on it, and he could see it in the camera, but he couldn't see it with his naked eye. And of course, Martin could see it, and I could see it. And anyway, it was just a Bigfoot. It wasn't trying to bother anybody. It was just watching us. And anyway, Martin got zapped that night. He was real sick, sickest I've ever seen him, besides not being able to breathe. I mean, sick-wise. He thought he was going to throw up. And he said, "Buddy, you have to take me to the campsite down there to the restroom." And I did. I drove him down there. And Martin stayed right there with the fire. And it was still daylight a little bit then. And he went in and cleaned up a little bit where hoping he wouldn't get sick again. And we came back, and I backed back up in there, and we're out talking and everything. He starts feeling sick again. And when these things, everybody has a different reaction when these things, what they call it, zapping or infrasounding, whatever. We think it's some type of radiation, personally. And the reason why we think that, because Joe and Jesse, Hellbent Holler, probably the best boots on the ground team out there, they actually took a Geiger counter and put it in a Bigfoot dogman track and found radioactivity in it. So I'm almost a believer. I've been zapped 3 times, and I truly believe that's what killed Scott Carpenter. He was zapped so many times, and he had an aneurysm. And that's just my opinion. I don't know that to be true, but it can make you sick. And Martin had been sick that whole afternoon, that whole night. For some reason, the dogmen tolerate Martin, but they seem to go after him more than they do anybody else. And anyway, we had finally got cleaned up. Martin was leaned back in his seat in his Suburban, starting to feel better. And it was around 11 o'clock at night. We started hearing, howls everywhere. And it wasn't a coyote. It was a howl like you only hear in the LBL that I've heard. So, and we all knew what it was. We could hear them running through the leaves on top of that huge ridge in front of us. And there was a ridge way up in front of us, probably 200 yards in front of us, that went all the way down that area from to the lake to the woods. And it was shallow water. It was winter pool at that time. The water was down behind us on the lake, and you could hear something running through that water, shallow water, like it was coming over toward us. And we were hearing these howls, and they were getting louder and louder, and I was getting a little nervous. And Martin says, "You better get ready, because I think they're going to come in on us." And he's still sick, and Martin says, "Well, I'm ready. Martin carries this massive sword with him all the time, and of course you're not supposed to have weapons in LBL, so we try to go by the law and not do things we're not supposed to. But when you got dogmen coming in on you, you got to be ready for something." And I didn't know if these things were just going to come in and attack us or what they were going to do, but you could hear them howling all around us, and it was getting closer and closer. And my phone service does not work in the LBL. I can never call out, and I can never get any activity on my phone at all. And I had my phone laying on the chair next to me, and my phone starts ringing. It's like 12 o'clock at night. I'm thinking, well, how can that be possible? And I picked it up, and it was a friend of mine who's one of the best I've ever seen at picking up on things and knowing intuition of what's about to happen. And her name is Beth Collinsworth. She's in my group, and she goes, "Where are y'all at?" And I said, "Well, we're all, me and Barton and Martin." She goes, "You're in the LBL, aren't you?" Before I even told her. And she didn't know where I was at. I hadn't talked to her in a week or so at that time. And I said, "Yeah, we're in the LBL." She goes, "Well, you got dog men all around you, and you got a feral man to the left of you." I said, "What? What are you talking about?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm feeling it and I'm seeing it. You got a feral man and dog man all around you." I said, "Well, I can hear dog man howling and everything. We can hear them running in the woods and crossing the water." She goes, "Well, y'all need to get out of there now." And I said, "Well, I don't think none of us are going anywhere. We're going to wait it out and see what happens." She goes, "Well, I'm telling you, get out of there now. Please tell me you'll get out of there." And I said, "Well, I got to go. I'll let you know later." And I hung up. And about that time, we hear them sound like they're really close in front of us over on the hillside coming down. Martin gets up out of his Suburban, walks right by us, past the fire, walks into the woods where I can't see him. I'm saying, "Man, don't go in the woods by yourself. What are you doing? Don't go in the woods by yourself." I jumped up to go catch him real quick as he went into the woods, and he just starts chanting real loud. Can't hear exactly what he's saying, but he's chanting real loud. I can't see him. I just know it's about where he's at, and can hear him saying something, but I can't understand what it is. And he comes right back like he's in some kind of trance, and just walks right by me and goes back and sits down in his vehicle. And I said, "Man, are you okay?" And he goes, "Yeah, everything's okay now." We did not hear a dog man or anything the rest of the night. And the next day, I kept saying, "Man, what did you do?" He said, "If you have Jesus Christ in you, these creatures know that you have Jesus Christ in you." I went over and recited something in Jesus Christ's name, and they all left. So it was never seen anything like that. But they did leave. It got quiet. And if he hadn't done that, I don't know if we would be sitting here today, because we weren't prepared for what could have been. But we were going to stick it out and see what happened. But we've had some strange encounters in the LBL, and a lot of people go there and been going there for years. I've never seen nothing. Some reason, Martin just seems to find these creatures, and I seem to be the same way with Bigfoot, and Martin just seems to be along and help us out. But Ron is so intelligent about these creatures that he can pick up on a lot of things. But it was amazing. I just still today can shake my head and think that was incredible how he just went in there and started shouting out whatever he said in the name of Jesus Christ. And it was so quiet after that. It was just amazing. The Bigfoot was gone. I didn't see him anymore. I don't know. It's pretty amazing how that worked.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I have so many more questions, but we are at our hour here, and I don't want to keep you much longer. But I know that you have some events coming up that you want to talk about as well. I want to get that in before we sign off here. Keep in mind this episode is going to air on July 12th. So anything that you got coming up past July 12th, where are you going to be at? Where can people find you? When is your book coming out? How's that going?
Well, I'm still working on the book. I'm one of those people that's I'm so particular about what I'm writing. I don't want to leave anything out, but I don't want to forget it and not. So I'll find myself tearing up a page and rewriting something on a continuous basis. So it's going kind of slow, but I'm getting there. And I like to ask everybody to please pray for Martin Groves. You know, he's been my best friend 45 years, and he's having a real tough time. You know, he's got COPD, he's got pneumonia, and he's got surgery coming up here in July. So please keep him in your prayers. And for him, he's a great man and really dedicated to Jesus Christ and a fantastic partner and researcher. Martin will be with me and at the Tennessee Wildman Conference on August 16th. It's a great conference here in the Tennessee area. We'd love to have you there. We've got a great show of good people there. Joe and Jesse of Hellbent Holler, M.K. Davis, Scott Nelson, Randy Hutchins, Linda Eastburn, Coonbo Baker, Tim Coonbo Baker, one of the best researchers I've ever known when it comes to Bigfoot out of Alabama. And some other great people, too. I mean, we'd like to see y'all there if you can come on August 16th. It's in McMinnville, Tennessee. My group is Bigfoot Creatures and Other Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures, and we'd like to have you join that if you're not already a member. And my other best friend, Ron Moorhead, and I are starting our podcast. Tomorrow night will be our first live, and it's called Two Real Cryptid Legends. And Ryan came up with the name, and he's definitely a cryptid legend and been a close friend of mine for quite a number of years. But we'll be live tomorrow night, and we'd sure like to have you come on and check us out. We'd like to have an audience there. So, but I want to appreciate Barnaby for having me on, and I've enjoyed being on your show. And if you want to have me back on again, I'll finish up what we were talking about. But thank you again for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We have so much more to talk about here. And I know there's a couple other stories that I was interested in as well, but I don't want to keep you. And definitely. Yeah. And when you get, this will come out after your podcast comes out. So I will have a link in the show notes so people can check that out as well.
Right.
And we'll get that. Your link to the Facebook group is in the show notes as well for people that are interested.
Let's be sure to, advertise your podcast in the group too. We have about 66,000 people now in our group. So we have a lot of people that do watch those podcasts.
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, I appreciate your time and all of your information, and wish you the best of luck, and hope that Martin as well, best of luck to him, and that everything goes well with him. I know
Thank you again. Thank you, Barbie, and thanks everybody for watching.
Absolutely. You take care, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
All right, guys, that is our show for this week. Thank you all for watching and tuning in. Check out all of Darrell Denton's stuff on Facebook. The links are in the show notes, and we will also get the links for the podcast in there for you as well. So until next time, guys, I'll see you on the edge.